Or 8, I got 9.
Okay. Thank you.
Frederick.
Okay, I'd like to call the Personnel Administration and Higher Education Committee to order and ask for approval of the minutes, I believe, from February 3rd.
I'll make the motion.
Moved by Supervisor Frazier, seconded by Supervisor Conover. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carried. Action agenda. The first thing is SUNY Adirondack update. I believe President Duffy is online.
I am. Yes. Good morning, everyone. Nice to see you all and hope you're doing well. Just a few quick updates. You can hear me, right? Just making sure. Yep. Okay. Just a few quick updates. Of course, our spring semester is in full swing. And in fact, we're coming up on our spring break, which is hard to believe. Our spring enrollment actually was a little bit over our budgeted enrollment, which is a good trend for us to see considering what we have been seeing in terms of enrollment patterns over the last several semesters. So we're pleased to see that. In fact, our spring total enrollment is just a tiny bit ahead of our fall enrollment, which is a very unusual thing to see in higher education. So we're glad to see that maybe we're seeing a little bit of rebound of more students coming back to college. And our fall admission applications right now are still trending ahead of last year at this time in double-digit percentage increases. So some good trends to watch. We also were able to maintain our housing capacity from fall to spring. So we're feeling pretty good. Our facilities master plan, I've mentioned it maybe a few times in some conversations. We've actually been working on a new plan for almost 2 years. We put it on pause during the height of the pandemic so that we could attend to what we needed to attend to and also recognize that potentially things that we learned through the pandemic could inform any modifications we might want to consider with our facilities. So we picked that work back up last fall, and the plan is in its final form, ready to be presented and approved by our shared governing bodies, including our Board of Trustees. Once that occurs through March, then we will be presenting that information to all of you. And that plan then goes to SUNY. It's a 10-year roadmap of where we think we may want to make modifications in our facilities. The last facilities master plan, a lot of the projects were focused on new construction. Because we were able to make so much progress on that plan, most of the plan this time around is modifications, renovations, still addressing deferred maintenance as we all have in our facilities. And so we'll be bringing that to you to share some of the projects that the college has identified over a 10-year or more period and the estimated costs on those. We are moving forward with our synthetic turf field complex that will be hopefully breaking ground in May of this year. Will extend throughout the summer and probably into the fall. And that turf field will accommodate men's and women's soccer, lacrosse, as well as baseball, which is a pretty amazing thing to do in one field. So we're excited to be able to finally upgrade our facilities to some degree to mirror what most high school athletes compete on in our region and around the state. So that project is on target and ready to be bid out over the next couple months. State funding, of course, as you know, we're all in state budget advocacy season. The governor's budget did indicate that the community college sector would be funded at 100% of what we've been calling the floor. In other words, a maintenance of effort amount compared to last year, which was great. That's the first time community colleges and even SUNY have even been identified in the executive budget. So we're really excited to start from that place. What we're asking the legislature to do is to reset the baseline of that floor, so to speak, to 2019, 2020 levels. In other words, pre-pandemic, which is more realistic to the types of funding that we require to operate our institutions. So we've been meeting with local legislators. In fact, tomorrow we have a few of our assembly members coming to meet with our students to talk about the value of course, what we do every day for our students in our community, and to continue to talk about funding community colleges at an appropriate level, including asking for some allocation of workforce development funding to go specifically to the community college sector, which is what we do really well if we are funded. And so we're asking for an investment in workforce training, specifically around some of our credit programs that bring people directly into the workforce, but also many of our non-credit short-term certification-based programs, which is really becoming much more popular for employers as well as students to skill up, as they say, or upskill, depending on which way you want to reverse the word. And but also to help those who are looking to enter a new field but want a shorter runway into that. So for example, right now we offer a coding academy where students can learn Python, which is a language particularly focused on data analytics, which, as we all know, is a very important industry or important skill for many different industries. And starting at the end of March this month, we're doing a sterile processing technician certification program. That's, again, a 10-week program where people come out certified, ready to support surgical operating room technicians. We'd like to scale up more of those types of programs. And so with some state investment, we think we can do that. So that's what's happening at the college, as well as our advocacy efforts to ensure our funding is appropriate for the college's needs. And I'm happy to answer any questions that any of you have.
Great. Does anyone have a question? I don't see any. Well,
Okay.
Thank you very much for the update.
Thank you. You all have a nice day. Thank you.
You too.
Yes, Chairman.
Just real quick, because of change, we potentially will make a change in attendance at these committee meetings. Can we ask before the committee meeting, because of Zoom and in person, can we ask that we do an attendance, so who's here ahead of time? Because it's hard if you're sitting back there to know who's on Zoom and who's not here. If
Okay.
they're on a committee, to avoid any conflicts. Would that be okay?
Sure.
If we just took attendance of the committee?
Sure.
Appreciate it.
Mr. Thomas,
Yes.
Mr. Conover,
Yes.
Mr. Beatty, Mrs. Frazier,
Here.
Mr. Wild,
Yes.
Ms. Bramer,
Here.
Ms. Runyon.
Okay. Thank you. In the packet is the standard reports from Human Resource Director. She did email these to me earlier and said that she wouldn't be able to attend today. So are there any questions? Okay. If the county attorney doesn't object, I would like to wait until towards the end of the agenda for the executive session.
Whenever it pleases the committee.
Okay. So we'll skip down to number 4. And that's the resolution tracking report by the clerk of the board.
Yep, that was the resolution tracking report for December, which you may recall, we had 100 resolutions for that meeting. So we're still working on that. It's not in your packets, but as soon as it's done, I will email it out to everyone and we'll put a copy on file with the minutes.
Thank you. Number 5 is referrals from the Criminal Justice and Public Safety Committee. And the first item is from the Sheriff's Department. And A is requesting that the Personnel, Administration, and Higher Education Committee could consider amending the Warren County Travel, Education, and Vehicle Use Policy, last adopted by Resolution 49 of 2021, to authorize department heads to approve free training opportunities.
bring that forward for discussion.
I'll second it.
Moved by Supervisor Conover and seconded by Supervisor Frazier. Discussion.
If we could maybe hear from the county administrator relative to his thoughts on this request. It looks pretty benign to me.
Yeah, sure. I wasn't here on Friday when the item was discussed, but I've tried to catch up to it since then. And I think that the sheriff initially came to committee with a request for his department to be able to approve travel on their own, which was under, was it $500? And the discussion led to free, because one of the things we did last year, we've streamlined the travel policy to make it more efficient last year, including I think the major change was once the travel form is approved by the 3 individuals who are on it, it's no longer a committee approval, it's a committee disclosure, if I remember correctly. And we also added no cost online trainings into that. So I think where the sheriff, I believe, was coming from was he has quite a bit of because I get them and I look through them and approve them. He does have quite a bit of training that he does that is of a low dollar amount. And the thought was to make the administration of all of this easier, to give him the latitude to approve without needing the travel form. The travel forms are worked on by the departments. There's backup attached because I won't sign them without backup. They come to me, I look it over, sign it. The budget officer, I believe, is the next one to look it over. The committee chair looks it over. And Amanda's office handles all that paperwork in terms of keeping track of it, chasing people down for signatures, making sure that they're included in committee agendas, printed out in committee packets. And then the auditor will also look through all of that backup documentation when she approves payment. If obviously she's not approving payment for $0, but when she approves payment for anything else. So that's my understanding of the request. But it appears that it was changed from 500 to just the free stuff.
Yeah, just follow on. So
Yes.
there would be a documentation that whatever travel was involved was authorized by the department.
Oh, yes.
That it would be authorized by the department. There would be something in writing. Even though it's free, it would have to meet with the department head's authorization.
Yes, yes.
Good. Mhm.
If I can add to that a little bit.
Yes.
I did have a chance to review the policies. The most current policy, it was only a minor change to it, is actually Resolution 146 of 2021. It almost, for purposes of this discussion, the 2 resolutions do mirror each other. I did go back and I looked at the prior resolution from 2020, which was 289. And the 289 resolution exempted and took out a paragraph that provided the authority that the sheriff's department is now asking for, but it was authority for the entire county when the expense was no more than $100. So just so the board is aware that the change from the 2020 resolution and policy to the 2021 took out the exception to when approval would not be required. And approval was not required on the Schedule A if there was no overnight accommodations, if it was not more than $100 per person per trip for travel and meal costs. And then there was other portions as well. That's normal course of business, that's for attendance at a seminar or training. So in essence, the sheriff's request is, it appears to me, looking to take that paragraph from, which was B2 under the 289 of 2020 and include it back in, but limit it only to the sheriff's department and to increase it from $100 to $500. And I do not want to speak for the criminal justice committee members, but there was discussion, I believe, about whether this committee would look at making a broader exception again across the county, or is it just limited to the sheriff's department?
Thank you. Supervisor Bramer.
Thanks, Chairman. I am on the Criminal Justice Committee, and I think one of the things that we did discuss was allowing a streamlined process for all of the department heads. I certainly have no problem amending the policy. One of my concerns is that this just came through criminal justice on Friday, so now there's nothing in our packet showing us the changes, the actual changes to the policy. I know the county attorney is rattling those section numbers off, but it'd be great to really see this in front of the Personnel Committee before we make formal changes to the policy. Thank you.
Yep, thank you.
If I could just add on to that,
Yes.
but the county attorney's office needs some direction from personnel on what that modification or change would look like. If we're limiting it to one department modification, or if there's a broader modification. And then based on that, what dollar amount, all of those details could certainly be in a draft proposal for the committee at a future meeting.
Yes, relating to this topic, I received an email from our county auditor, Ms. Curran, and after the Criminal Justice Committee meeting, she voiced what she thought that we should entertain, and she feels it would be more efficient, less cumbersome, regardless of the cost. Less cumbersome process to reinstate the policy to allowing travel and education expenses to be incurred with only department approval under a certain dollar amount. So whether it's 500 or whatever the number is. But she does go on and she says that if we do that she would encourage us that the policy be clear on whether the threshold includes all expenses to the county as opposed to solely the cost of the conference. And she gives an example, you have the cost of the conference, but then you have the hotel room and the meals and travel. So that was, she felt whatever policy, it should be clear that it's all the expenses. Just throw that up there. Yes, Supervisor Siebert.
Thank you for allowing me to speak in a committee I'm not a member of. I appreciate that. I made this referral or this discussion item at Criminal Justice, and Criminal Justice voted to send this over to this committee. I was happy to see our auditors input on this, and I agree with the supervisor from Glens Falls that having a draft resolution before us to consider would be incredibly helpful. But what the sheriff brought up was an important distinction, but I don't think it was one that only applies to the sheriff's department. I think there are many department heads that would like the flexibility and frankly deserve the flexibility to be able to sign up for training. But that all-inclusive cost is a really important factor. Many times the training requests come through and you don't see that whole comparison of that $100, that free training now costs $1,000 when you're traveling or you're spending the night. So capping that, I don't know if it's $250 that's reasonable or $500. I think I'd want to weigh in. Perhaps that's something our county administrator could circulate to our department heads and ask them what on average would be something that we'd still have some checks and balances, but at the same time allow some flexibility for them and for their employees to be able to attend reasonable trainings without a cumbersome paper trail. This was never anything that had to be approved by committee, but rather just the committee chair, the department head, and the county administrator. So it was streamlined. It just seemed like with all the training that has been coming up and so much of it being virtual, that there's a better way to do this. And I don't think it just applies to the sheriff's office. So I would ask that this committee please consider modifying this policy, including some draft language and bringing it back so we could assist all of our departments with this need. Thank you.
Okay, Supervisor Wild.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. From my perspective, our directors all have a budget for their training. And I feel that they should have the ability to make these decisions without constantly coming looking for approval. If it's based on, maybe a $500 max, I'd absolutely support that to streamline this process and move these committee meetings along even a little bit faster.
Thank you. Supervisor McGowan.
Thank you. I was at the criminal justice committee meeting, and I listened to our undersheriff. And one of the reasons that I didn't hear stated was for more of the expediency is sometimes some of these trainings come up quickly and at the last minute, where I think he had someone on a Friday that was able to join on a Monday, and being able to get all the approvals in that because there was an opening that was made. So I that was one of his points that I had heard that I didn't hear that our administrator brought up. Of why the expediency. So I'm sure other departments have the same problems, that sometimes an opening will open up, it was closed because it was full, and then they were able to move over. So, streamlining with 5, I agree with maybe putting a dollar limit for the director.
And that issue does also tend to come up with the legal departments, in particular, the public defender. The public defender has a lot of money from the state for training. And depending on what's happening with their cases, sometimes an attorney who was busy suddenly is freed up and can jump on a webinar. So there's definitely an application across departments as to timeliness.
Supervisor Conover.
Yeah, no, I think the suggestion, I think, to table this matter and have something brought to us in writing was a good suggestion. And I think that as long as the county administrator and county attorney come away from this meeting with all of the input that they think that they need to draft something, I certainly would support of the tabling of this and applying it on a countywide basis. I think that was a good suggestion, and I think we do need to see it in writing in front of us. And so I would say at some point that this item should be tabled, and next month, if it's next month, come back to us with something in writing, and I think we'll be good to go. Sounds like we'd be good to go.
Sure.
I understand the parameters to be all county departments. To some, that the dollar amount that we choose would be all inclusive of all costs. And I will survey department heads on what they feel is a good number. We'll whatever, if there's a consensus, we'll put that number in. And if the committee would like to change that number, the dollar amount, we could make that change at the committee. Is that accurate?
I think with one addition that the expense is within their budgeted allotment.
Correct.
Per the supervisor from Queens.
That was mentioned, and I think we're talking about a per person cost, because sometimes they're sending more than one person to the training.
This would be, my understanding is it would be per person.
Per person. And if that's the understanding, then I think Supervisor Bramer's suggestion to, I think it was his suggestion to table this. I certainly, Supervisor Bramer, if you're prepared to make a tabling motion, I certainly would second it.
I would ask to hold on that for one moment, because there's one additional issue that's not clear to me in the current policy, which is for members of the Board of Supervisors and supervisors, what's the process and procedure? Because it's very clear to me in this policy that it goes through, when it needs to, a department head and the county administrator and a committee chair. But what is the travel and education policy for purposes of approval for supervisors? Because that's a piece is it not in this policy at all, or not intended to be covered by this policy? Or if it is, I'm not clear from and I'll admit it was a quick read because there wasn't a lot of turnover time this month to really dig into it, but I'm just not clear what the intent of the Board of Supervisors is for supervisor travel and education.
Yes, Supervisor Driscoll.
Thank you, Chairman. And I don't mean to be a wise guy. I just want to be able to understand this. If the Department of Social Services is sending 3 individuals to a conference and it's $200 per head, and $500 is the threshold, to circumvent the policy, would they prepare 3 separate requests, or would they put them all under the same request, at which time they would need to go through a different process?
Same request.
Same request.
Yeah, that's a
Well,
good point.
No, it's my understanding is the committee is looking to do a per person policy.
Right.
So if there's 3 people attending, whatever that cap is that the committee recommends for the board to consider, it would be a per person cap, not a per event.
Right.
So if the cost, for example, if you use the $500 number, as long as the total cost, meaning the registration, the attendance, the meals, the travel is below 500
Per person. Okay, thank you.
but the question will be, the follow-on question, once we can get a draft together, is what should that number be for purposes of a cutoff?
Supervisor Bramer.
Thank you, Chairman. I think that Administrator Moore said he'll help us with that number after he talks to some department heads and gets an idea there. I think everything we've talked about is great. And I understand the county attorney looking for some guidance on the other issue, but I don't see that as before us today. And I would like to make a motion to table at this time.
Okay, we have a motion to table 5A, seconded by Supervisor Conover. I'll call the question on the motion to table. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? No? No opposition. 5A is tabled. 5B is authorizing the Warren County Sheriff to fill vacancies in budgeted and funded patrol officer positions and amending the rules of the board. Last adopted by Resolution 68 of 2021 to allow for the same. I think this is similar to what goes on with the correction officers, only I think it's directed at the patrol officer. At least that's my understanding. We have a motion.
This is the one that Larry needs to speak to.
Okay.
When this matter was presented to the Criminal Justice Committee, there was a vote taken on it, and the final vote was 3 in favor, 2 opposed. After that meeting, there were some further discussions regarding the voting. And after that vote was taken, it was determined that by the chair that the matter passed. So last night, I provided to all members of the Board of Supervisors a legal opinion, which is attorney-client privilege. I would rather defer getting into the details of that opinion in open session, but for purposes of the discussion right now, a 3-2 vote on a 7-member committee is not a sufficient number of votes in favor to move a matter forward. So it is on the agenda today for the Personnel Committee, but it did not acquire the required number of votes in the Criminal Justice Committee to move out of committee.
Okay.
And to be clear, which would have been 4 votes, the same as quorum for that committee.
Yes, Supervisor Driscoll.
Thank you, Chairman. I just had I guess a question on that. I was unclear if the chairman of the board is only called upon in order to make quorum, or if the chairman of the board has that opportunity to allow for a legal vote, if you understand what my question is.
I have not reviewed that specific question in relations to this issue and what occurred at the Criminal Justice Committee meeting. I can provide you an answer to that off record, but I am very hesitant to ever provide a quick answer to a question because the quick answer often doesn't take into account the detail of the rules of the board, state statutes, and other things that may come into play. So
I
have
just
no-
wanted to put that out. I'm not looking for a quick.
And I don't
response.
believe it has any, I guess maybe a more on point response would be that issue would have no impact on the result of the vote that occurred in the Criminal Justice Committee meeting.
Mr. Chairman, it's Mike.
Yes, Supervisor Wild.
Thank you very much. I'm just curious, is this something we might consider without the referral? Because basically what we're doing is we're delaying this for nearly 2 months. If it's something that needs to be done prior to that, is it something that we could consider?
Well, we could consider it, but it's still a referral. I mean, a committee member could bring it forward. I don't see why they couldn't.
Only because I went back and reviewed the tape from the meeting. I do want to let this committee know that the Criminal Justice Committee spent a good 8 to 9 minutes
Right.
debating this one topic before the vote was taken. So there was certainly some time spent at that committee addressing this issue.
Yes, Supervisor Bramer.
Thank you, Chairman. You know, I know we could take this up today. I guess I have a similar concern as to 5A, where we don't have an actual written proposal in front of us. It only passed through on Friday. Well, I should say it didn't actually pass through criminal justice, but it got on the personnel committee agenda. I understand that, you know, the sheriff wants to move forward and be able to fill positions, but I'm sure plenty of other department heads want the same sort of flexibility. And I think this is kind of an important decision as to whether or not we're going to abdicate any review over the filling of those positions by our department heads when it's in the budget and it's already in the salary table. Maybe we go forward with that. I'm not sure I feel totally comfortable making that decision because it does take us out of the loop a lot as to whether or not department heads are filling these positions without us knowing. And I guess that's where I stand today. I don't feel comfortable with us doing that just for the sheriff if we're not going to do it for the rest. And I don't feel great about doing it for all of our department heads. Thank you for the opportunity.
Supervisor Seaver. Oh. You wait a minute. Supervisor Conover.
No, please.
No, I'm not a member of the committee. I'll defer to the committee member first.
Yeah, I think I make 2 points. The first is that the sheriff is, like the treasurer, is an elected position and has been vested with certain authorities per state law. And so we should familiarize ourselves with that and try to understand that that difference is with distinction. There's the difference between the sheriff as an elected chief executive officer of that department and an appointed or otherwise selected department head. That's number one. And the second is that these positions, positions in our budgets exist in a couple of different ways, at least a couple of different ways. First, there's the organizational structure of the department, which constitutes so many positions of certain types, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's not, some of those positions, while they exist in the organizational structure, are not funded positions. So if the department, or including the sheriff, and I'll stand corrected on this, if somebody wants one of those positions funded, wants to amend their budget, I believe that does pull us into the process. And now, relative to a position that exists in the organizational structure that we have approved per the budget, I think that's the question, is if it exists and exists within our budget, and it's a funded position within our budget, how much more say do we want to have beyond basically telling the sheriff that, okay, you have these positions, they're funded positions. go do your duty. I mean, I think that's the question. So I guess what I would put out there to anyone that wants to have a role in that is, you know, what specifically is the role that you're looking for beyond the creation of the position and the funding of the position. And I'd like to hear some feedback on that, and so that I can properly evaluate the sheriff's request and the concern, if there is one.
Yeah, they're all good points. I think we maybe need some more information. Yes, Supervisor Seaver.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The supervisor from Bolton and I, in a rare moment, agree on some of the comments that you just made regarding elected. And in the criminal justice meeting, as our county attorney alluded to, we spent significant time debating this issue. So for those of you that did listen in on that debate, we would have heard a similar dialogue about elected. And is this the appropriate way to just carve out one elected versus the fact that you do have a county treasurer elected, a county clerk, a DA? And should those positions then be treated in the same way on the argument that they're elected? And what are their authorities under that law? That being said, we do have a policy that exists here at the board that we have followed, and it may be wise to look at it in the same way we did the previous item on other department heads that are not elected, that are also experiencing perhaps some hesitancy or stalled time in filling positions that are budgeted. Once again, looking at the county as a whole and not just pointing out one elected or one department, that perhaps this could also reach its way to a table with a refer back date next month so that we could have a proposed resolution in front of us to look at. So that is just a recap of what we did talk about, just like the training. I hope that discussion is for budgeted training dollars, not where training dollars haven't been budgeted. And I look forward to being able to help all of our departments and the efficiencies with those checks and balances in place. But my comment was back a few people or supervisors ago, from the supervisor from Glens Falls, asking about the quorum with the chair. I would also ask that our county attorney, when you do look into that issue, I noticed on our standing rules that our finance chair, a new line was added to our standing rules at the time we passed them, saying that the finance chair may perform the duties of the chair in sitting in to make a quorum. And I think this issue will be an important one, as our finance chair sits on multiple committees. The chair stands in as a quorum to vote on matters, when there isn't a quorum, because he or she does not sit as a voting member on any committee before the board. So I'm wondering if in that context, county attorney, you could also evaluate that final sentence, because that does seem to be an irregularity, and perhaps it's something the county can do, but it is very different in looking at the 60 plus other rules of the board that I have reviewed over the last decade. Thank you.
I've made a note of it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I don't believe we have a motion to move this forward, so I think there's all good points taken, and I think we need more information and possibly a resolution. Yes.
My recommendation, which you don't have to take, if you were to ask me, how would you redo this policy? If there is an appetite to free up an official like the sheriff, I would say that it should apply to all the elected department heads, that they have the ability to fill vacancies as long as they're budgeted for on their own, with appropriate disclosure to the Board of Supervisors. I would not, from an administrative perspective, want that to extend past the elected department heads. I do think that we ought to have some input into those who are not elected. And I think that if any of those individuals has an emergency situation, the rules of the board already provide for a way for them to address that, where there is an emergency procedure where the chair of a committee can approve the vacancy be filled and then report it to the committee subsequently, so long as that committee hasn't previously rejected the position being filled. So that would be my thought.
Thank you. Yes.
Just
Supervisor Conover.
one final comment. I think that the reason I asked that question was because nothing prevents, for those that might want to extend this to other departments, non-electeds, nothing prevents us, for example, from authorizing this today and then considering the balance tomorrow. We don't have to hold this up today because we want some kind of universal thinking on everything. But I'll support the tabling of this for additional information and consideration. But again, I would say, while I respect the idea of, well, how does this apply to other departments? I would say that I'm willing to consider suggestions in that regard as they're presented. Thank you.
I think it comes out of the amount of time it takes to train a patrol officer. I think that's where, and I can understand that.
Right. Mr. Chairman, it's Mike again. If you don't
Yeah.
mind.
Supervisor Wild?
I'm just curious, this would eventually go to the full board for approval, correct? So if that's the case, why don't we consider approval today? And then that will give the sheriff, an extra month to make something happen. And if we come up with more details in terms of why we shouldn't do that, then we could make that decision during the full board meeting.
Yeah,
I'm just curious. This is just my thought.
that's doable.
So if I were to offer a motion forward to consider this for the committee, let's see if we have a second.
Okay, motion made by Supervisor Wild. We have a second by Supervisor Conover. Further discussion. Down.
Thank you. Yeah, isn't March the first month where we're going to 2 meetings?
After the March board meeting. So it'd be April.
Oh, it's after, so it'll be in April. Okay, thank you.
And
Mr. Chairman,
yes, Supervisor Bramer.
actually, I just wanted to note that I had asked Amanda recently, and Ms. Allen said that our second board meeting would likely be on March 31st.
Okay. Yes, Supervisor Bramer. Or, I'm sorry, Seaver. Let's look at the Supervisor Bramer.
I'm filtering. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Much like Supervisor Bramer's, or much like the supervisor from Glens Falls, my question about the motion that's on the table right now is, are you modifying it for all elected? I didn't hear any opposition to that. And the idea being that, again, we're looking at one particular elected, and I would hate to think that we aren't looking at our other elected. If we're going to take the county administrator's recommendation off the floor here today without looking at a proposed resolution and language that will be debated at the full board, is it possible to include that for all elected department heads? Mr. Chairman?
Yeah, we could amend what's being put forward. It's up to Supervisor Wild, and I think the second was Supervisor Conover. I don't object to that.
I certainly don't object to that. I mean, let's be clear now. We'd be talking about, let's kind of list them if we would. We'd be talking about the treasurer, who's an elected official. We would be talking about the district attorney. We're obviously talking about the sheriff, the clerk of the board, the county clerk. Anyone else? Am I missing anyone?
I think so.
I think that's it. And yeah, I think if Supervisor Wild is prepared to consider your suggestion and amend his motion, I would amend my second to at least move it forward, and let's have some discussion on it. Sure.
I'll move it forward for discussion for sure. Thank you. I'll agree to that amendment.
County Attorney.
Just to ask a question to clarify, since we're going to end up drafting it. So within budget, does that mean that there's no need to transfer funds within a department's budget to fill?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you for clarifying.
I would say that if you need to transfer funding into a position, it's an unfunded position that.
Right.
Now, we want to be clear on this, and maybe we want to talk to the county treasurer about this a little bit, because sometimes they have to transfer dollar amounts into budget codes. I'd like to hear from the county treasurer if that would be allowed. Relative to, this is a very fine point that's being made here, and I think we need to resolve it.
Mr. Swan?
Well, as one of the elected officials we're talking about, if I'm going to be given this ability to fill a position, I think it has to be a budgeted position, and it has to be in the budget, the amount of dollars for it, period. No transfer from another item, another place in the budget. It has to be that. Otherwise, I think you're going to open it up to a pretty tough problem. So if I'm going to be replacing somebody and I have the authority now to go and hire somebody without getting board approval, then there should be no extra money, period, from anywhere.
I agree.
It should already be in your 101.
It should be, if you're going to fill a position that's a $45,000 position, you better have $45,000 in your salary code for that position, period. That's the way I'm looking at it.
I would agree. And I would say that was part of my thinking on the second, but I would refer to Mr. Wild, Mr. Chairman, on his motion.
I agree with that also. It's a good idea. Thank you, Mike.
I think the suggestion on the part of Supervisor Sieber that we amend this idea and move it forward comprehensively is a good suggestion, and it will open the discussion further, and we can deliberate on what we hear going forward.
Right.
Mr. Chairman, is this,
Yes.
it's Mike again, if you don't mind.
Yes.
Is this all tied to the same motion with this filling of the sheriff's position, or is it a second motion, second resolution?
No, this is amending the 5B, basically.
Ending 5B. Okay.
If I could clarify for the supervisor from Queensberry, actually, this would be an amendment to the rules of the board for 2022, because that's the provision that governs this aspect of filling vacancies.
My sense, I would like to see these separate because it's the sheriff's, there's a certain amount of urgency in public safety versus the urgency to go through the full board and amending the rules of the board for this type. And I'd rather not have the sheriff's opportunity denied because there were questions about changing the rules.
We would have to change the rules if we did just the sheriff as well.
Right.
Yeah, this issue touches on the rules of the board that was already passed in January. So some amendment would have to occur to the rules of the board in order for the policy to change.
Supervisor Bramer.
Thank you. I'm actually in support of keeping it all together so that it's for all of the elected department heads. I do have a question as to whether or not once this approval goes through, those positions then will be reported back to us on the regular tracking sheet. Is that correct?
Yes, I would, yes.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Supervisor Sieber.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To the very distinct point the supervisor from Bolton made that these are not questions getting in the weeds, but incredibly important to the drafting of the resolution. I just heard our treasurer, and if I may ask him a question about the budgeted, please.
Yes, you can.
County Treasurer Swan, when you talk about there being funding, budgeted money into the for the position, that it must be funded and not transferred from any other lines. It is my understanding that in order to do a transfer in the one lines, meaning salary, to and from, that requires committee resolution, committee approval, committee resolution. When you're talking about funding, many times I see department heads transfer money from, say, a supply or an other line or in the 4 codes, and then to make up money perhaps that they might need in a salary line or from a different line other than the salary, the 1 codes. So how does this affect that? When you say budget it completely, in terms of transferring of money between all those different line items, I can hear someone say, well, I can transfer, anytime you transfer from the forwards or any other line into the salary, you're coming to committee for a resolution for that. So how does that get addressed in this or your proposed budgeted position?
Well, first of all, if you're moving money from an object code to a salary code, you're correct. It has to go through the committee and come to the board for approval to move that money. That's a requirement. What I'm talking about is when you set up your budget at the beginning of the year, you have an accountant, X number of dollars. You have a junior accountant, X number of dollars. If you want to fill that junior accountant spot, that's the money you have to have in your budget for that position. You can't fill it and say, okay, the old guy was at 40 and I want to put the new one in at 45. Absolutely not. If you want to fill it for less, then I don't see that there's a problem. But you have to have, in my opinion, whatever is budgeted for that position is what you would have to have. No moving it around within salary, no moving it from any place else.
Thank you. That was exactly what I was looking for clarification on.
Anyone else on the motion before us? And the motion is to include all electeds.
Oh, I apologize. And I kind of asked it out of the mic and I apologize to the treasurer. Oh, and I apologize to the committee for even saying it. We are not talking benefit package for the new hire. We're just talking salary number, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
I think. Yeah.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
Isn't the benefit package still part of the budget?
Yeah, it would have to be funded, obviously. I mean, if you're going to fill a position that you have money for the salary, you better have money for the benefits also.
Okay. I think it'll work. Thank you.
Yes, Supervisor Conover.
Yeah, and I think to put this in maybe a bigger structure, a bigger framework, we're having an increasingly difficult time attracting people to municipal government and across a whole range of classes and job types. And I think that offering some flexibility within the existing approved budget beyond, our processes, I think is something that, while it may not resolve the issue, it certainly can't hurt. And we have had on occasion departments come to us and feel that in order to get people that they have to increase this position, what they pay for that position, and that would have to come back to us. That request would have to come back to us. And whether it be an attorney in the district attorney's office or anyone else. So I think that then, and if it turns out that this is a real problem going forward, well, then we can always, modify our thinking on this at the appropriate point in time. So I think it's a good place where we've arrived at here.
Okay. If there's no other discussion, we'll call the question. Does everybody understand the motion?
Mhm.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, carried. Number 6 is a referral from the Health Services Committee. This is Office for the Aging. And the request is to amend the table of organization and salary schedule to create and fill the new position of Services Assistant, Office for the Aging, number 4, grade 7, base annual salary of $36,414, and delete the position of Typist, grade 3, base annual salary $30,373, and this will be effective, if passed, March 21st, 2022. Moved by Supervisor Conover, seconded by Supervisor Frazier. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Number 6 is carried. Number 7 is a referral from the Human Services Committee. And this request for the Personnel Administration and Higher Education Committee to consider directing the Civil Service Office to produce a detailed written process and checklist that department heads will use when advertising vacant positions. How does the committee feel about that? Okay, moved by Supervisor Conover,
Second.
seconded by Supervisor Bramer. Discussion. Yes. Supervisor Conover.
I think it's a great idea. I think having this in writing so that our department heads clearly understand from civil service what the steps are and that you follow them in a certain order. I mean, it just seems to me like a very good thing.
Yep. Supervisor Bramer.
Thank you. I do too. I think, I guess I'd just like to clarify that this motion is to ask civil service to put together the list for us, and then it will still come back to committee for us to review.
Yes, I would. Yes. It seems how we're requesting it. Yes.
Thank you, Chairman.
Supervisor Sieber.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm not a member in this committee, but I'm having quite a good day not being a member of this committee and hearing such wonderful referrals come from our subcommittees over here. Thank you for entertaining them all, and to the committees for being willing to look at the county policies as a whole. This was, and just a quick background on this, I think most of the work is done. The county administrator worked last year at our request, and I say our because really that came, I believe, from Supervisor from Glens Falls, who was the personnel chair at the time, in looking at how we can be more creative with less dollars. And this came out of, I believe it was Supervisor Frazier's committee about a Supervisor Driscoll's for a $2,000 fill on a advertising with the Post-Star. And one of the things that we looked heavily at last year was how can we help our department heads hire and advertise and be creative in that. And I think having that checklist looked at again and redeveloped as a suggested checklist, but also for it to come to committee for us to take a look at of where, some utilizing our public information officer and social media, in utilizing, maybe, I know our treasurer uses Indeed a lot, I think you said, and you have great results with Indeed, very inexpensively. And the number of ads you can put on that for what you can in some newspapers, although some people still read the hard print or the online ads. So I think there has to be a combination of what's right for that particular department head. And then some of these department heads have funding that can go towards these things that are grant funded. So the advertising and the creativity we are members of the Adirondack Regional Chamber, we can utilize them. There's an entire list of ways that we can up our game in recruitment and recruitment for employees. And this would be one way that I think we could support our department heads and their staff that are responsible for creating these positions, but also to have some standardized way about this. We've had positions we've put out there, we've gotten very little back because we haven't utilized all this creativity. And I think this process would be a really great start. And I appreciate the personnel committee taking a look at carrying on what we started last year and not letting that go to the wayside.
Okay. Yes, Supervisor Bramer.
Thank you, Chairman. I will say we did work on this last year, trying to just make sure that there was a checklist that the department heads could follow so they could have some guidance and they weren't feeling like they were on their own. I know that Trish has already worked on this, so it's not going to be too hard. Some of the things that we talked about last year were, of course, posting on the county website, sending out email blasts, using social media, talking to SUNY, and also, for instance, with the public defender, putting the job description out on our school. Like Albany Law School has professional job boards that we can use. And also, like the supervisor from Queensbury mentioned, websites like Indeed or LinkedIn, where we put out those ideas to our department heads to make sure that they understand these options are available to them. in addition to things like putting out the newspaper notices, which do cost money. And according to Trish, don't always give us a very good return. So just trying to put out some different ideas in a more succinct way that the department heads can follow, I think is a great idea, but allowing them to have some flexibility there too, depending on what the job is.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Supervisor Driscoll.
Thank you, Chairman. As Supervisor Bramer said, it was a spirited meeting, a lot of good discussion and suggestions. I would just also hope that we would include professional trade association publications, which we've used in the past, especially with when we go nationally for certain positions. A lot of them are legal positions, but other departments do the same, that we, that they're included in their nursing positions and things like that, that have a network outside of traditional type of newspaper or Facebook or those types of, Indeed, those types of forums.
Right.
So make sure that we include everything, please. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other discussion on number 7?
Mr. Chairman, it's Mike, if you don't mind.
Supervisor Wild.
Thank you very much. I think it's important for us to recognize that the younger generation is very technically savvy, and the internet plays a huge role in what they do, and tools such as Indeed should be utilized, I would imagine, for each and every position, because we get a much further reach than we'll get from traditional print or trade magazines, and could save a significant amount of money. But if I'm not sure if that's included in there, but I think that would be something that we should encourage our department heads to use. Thank you.
Yeah, well, this will come back to the Personnel Committee, so we'll have time to adjust it if it's not. So that's Supervisor Conover.
Yeah, I mean, these are civil service positions, and these are professional civil service positions, and civil service, as you know, has, an abundance of rules and regulations and whatever. But I think where this type of written material gets very helpful is particularly in areas like where active lists don't exist and you have provisional appointments, and making sure you communicate well with the applicant on what a provisional appointment is and what is contingent on, including scoring well on an examination and all of these other kinds of things. And I think the more you commit to writing on all of this, the better. So, by the way, when we have all of this brought together, then provide that also to the municipalities, because municipalities operate through civil service as well. So it can be helpful to the municipalities as well. So I think it's all a good idea. Mhm.
Treasurer Swan.
I know this will probably throw a monkey wrench into this, but I would also request that not only with hiring, but with dismissing employees, there needs to be some, not so much policies, but at least something put out there for the department heads to understand how they can dismiss an employee so that it's done appropriately at the time. We've had several lawsuits against the county for inappropriate dismissals, and just as a thought, just
that might be another day.
Chairman,
Yes, Supervisor Bramer.
I agree with you on that, Chairman. Thank you. That might be for another day. And it is something that I asked about last year as personnel chair and was told that we need to be very careful with putting a set of procedures in place for the dismissal process, because then if we are not following those, we can be held, accountable for not doing that. While I don't necessarily agree with that, I do understand that there's a lot of caution to be had when approaching this particular subject. So I think that is a discussion for another day. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Supervisor Conover.
Yeah, not to labor on this, but let's be clear that civil service has its own rules and regulations on termination civil service employees. And Article 75 has a very specific, I think 75 has this very specific procedure and whatever. However, the point being made, perhaps the non-civil service positions and how it's handled relative to non-civil service positions, maybe there needs to be guidance provided. And once again, whatever guidance is provided, please provide that out to the municipalities and entities that also rely on the civil service and non-civil service for their public employment. Thank you.
Right, Supervisor Seaver?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To that point, and to two of these points, the guide that's coming back to us to look at for a draft, in my opinion, I hope everyone's opinion, should include both civil service and non-civil service. Those it's very helpful to have that list, and certainly Jackie can work with Trish for those ones that may not be falling under whatever particular category. But I do think it's a need across the board to have that type of supportive inquiry and assistance. And when recruiting, as it relates to disciplinary and termination, I think the treasurer's suggestion is a good one. I would ask that you formally adopt it as a pending item so that moving forward, we can make sure that, again, this discussion that took place last year is forwarded on to this year and looked at, particularly now with our county attorney on board. I've heard over the years, many department heads concerned about what is that process when you go to discipline? What is the process when you go to terminate? Where can they get advice? What are some suggestions for documentation? How do things go in a personnel file? What is the appropriate amount? Who should be present? There are a lot of questions, and I don't think any of us on this board are experts in that area. And to the point that, well, should it be municipalities? I think first and foremost, we're here as county representatives. We need to focus on the county issues at hand, whether they be civil service or non-civil service, and have something like this. And hopefully it can help the municipalities, but geared in mind to the county. And but that is a level of concern. And since we are in a very heavily litigated lawsuit at the moment around those issues, perhaps this is something a county attorney could work with our HR and our civil service staff on to start coming up with some guidance. It's a very tricky area. It's one that people are incredibly uncomfortable with, and it should be handled with the utmost care and respect and privacy, so that when we do take those actions, they are not taken lightly.
Good point.
Do you need a motion from one of your members to put that on as a discussion item?
No, we
That's
have a
pending.
motion right now for number 7. And
As
this
it, I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, just as it relates to the discipline and termination was my question.
we're going to deal with.
Okay.
We're on excuse me, we're on number 7. And is there any further discussion on the checklist for advertising for hiring vacant positions? Okay, I'll call the question on that. All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, number 7 is carried. Does the
Mr. Chairman, did
Yes.
you say that you would put that on the pending items about the disciplinary process?
I was just getting to that.
I'm sorry.
Would the committee want to have that as a pending item, the process for dismissal of probably basically non-civil service employees? I mean, I think the civil service is pretty well spelled out.
Mr. Chairman, it's Mike. I believe that's important. I'm surprised we don't have something already. But if we don't, then there should be some guidelines for what they need to be followed.
I think so too. Chiming in.
Yep. I don't think we need a motion. I think we'll just make that a pending item. County attorney, okay with that?
Yep, I have it. Thank you.
Okay. Number 8 is a referral from the Tourism Committee. And this is a request to amend the table of organization and salary schedule to create and fill the new position of principal account clerk, per diem hourly rate of $24.77, and to defund the full-time principal account clerk position effective April 4th, 2022. Moved by Supervisor Conover, seconded by Supervisor Frazier. Any discussion? Yes, Supervisor Bramer?
Thanks, Chairman. I guess since we can't hold on to her and make her stay, we can do this instead. Thank you.
Supervisor Diamond?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A couple questions. If we change this organizational chart and create this part-time principal account clerk, and we're going to vacate, are we going to take the full-time principal account clerk position out of the organizational chart? And my next question would be, this being a part-time position, I'm sure that that's falls under the civil service guidelines from a part-time position. Do we then have to advertise it and subject and get an eligibility list of candidates that want to work in this role as a part-time principal account clerk? Those are my questions. Maybe somebody from the tourism department
Yeah.
can answer that for me.
Yes, Ms. Connolly is here.
And okay, go ahead.
Good morning. I don't know the rules about advertising this position. I did talk with Trish Nenninger and Jackie Figueroa before I moved ahead with this. It is termed a per diem versus part-time. I think for part-time position, there are very specific hours and days that you work, but per diem, the individual could come in and work on an as-need basis a couple of days a week, a little bit more during budget time. But I don't know the obligations about posting
Okay.
the position.
A follow-up question is, you know, I'm all for saving money for the county, and this is a reduction in salary. How is it determined that over the past years, we needed somebody full-time and now we can go to part-time? How did you determine that?
So Lisa has been with the department for many years, 15 years or so. She knows the position well. When a new employee came into our department last year, about this time in April, tourism development and events coordinator, that individual began working with Lisa on many of the occupancy tax related, the whole application process, the applications that are submitted, the review process that goes on, the summary that's created, the back and forth with each of those event organizers to make sure that they get all of the required documentation in, coming to the committee and making their presentations, et cetera, et cetera. Lisa used to do that in the past, and she worked closely with Supervisor Dickinson, had been the committee chair for many years. And really, I was responsible for the tourism side of the budget and the agenda, and Lisa and Supervisor Dickinson worked on the occupancy tax side of the budget and the committee agenda. So Kristen has started doing that work over the last year, quite a bit of it. And Lisa felt that, one, I would like to retire, but we do still need you in the department for the financial responsibilities. But now that Kristen is able to take much of that day-to-day occupancy tax work off Lisa's desk, that's who's doing the work right now.
So Kristen is going to take some of her job responsibilities, some of Lisa's job responsibilities, and assume those responsibilities.
The way that her job description was written, all of that was written into the description that she would work with these event organizers.
Do you anticipate Kristen coming looking for a stipend for taking additional responsibilities on?
She's been doing this since she started on day one.
Okay. And if this job position has to go up for public bidding or competitive testing, do you feel comfortable with someone that doesn't have the experience being in the office and filling this position with a part-time position?
If it's not Lisa,
Yes. Yes. I hate to get into a position where we decided to fill this part-time, and for some reasons it didn't work out with Lisa, or through the process of civil service, maybe Lisa isn't eligible for the job and have to come back and replace Lisa with a full-time person.
Well, I thought I did my due diligence in checking with personnel and HR, and we were okay with this. So the fact that I might have to advertise that position did not come up in discussion, so I can't.
But
speak
the
to that.
question is, if someone other than Lisa
Mhm.
gets that job, do you feel that we can perform the necessary functions in the department with a part-time person that does not have the experience in that particular, in the tourism department?
If the event coordinator position stays filled as it is, I do think that a part-time position could work for the principal account clerk. If something should change with the other position, then I would think that we would need the full-time principal.
So
account
is it
clerk.
our intent to eliminate the full-time principal account clerk's position from the organizational chart? Not leave it vacant with unfunding, but completely eliminate it?
I had asked that it be defunded in the event that down the road something changed and Lisa decided, okay, I am ready to walk away. And maybe Kristen moves on and we do need that full-time position in the office. I would request that it stay in the unfunded organization table.
Thank you.
Organization table unfunded.
Thank you.
Administrator Moore?
Yeah, I'm about 99% certain that we wouldn't need a competitive process to fill this, but we'll verify that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. That little line of distinction between per diem and part-time, I think.
Supervisor Bramer?
Thank you, Chairman. This discussion does bring up something that there was a concern about the event coordinator position. I think I'm getting that title right. The one that Kristen is in, that might not be permanent. And I know my colleague from the town of Queensbury is interested in this subject. And I want to make sure that if we are going down this route of hiring the part-time position, that Kristen's position is not at risk. I think we need to take away that shadow of doubt that she doesn't have a permanent position here at the county, because if that's the case, then maybe we don't allow this part-time position to go forward and we keep a full-time fiscal account clerk. So I'd like this committee to have a discussion that events coordinator is a permanent position and will stay, that we don't have any plans of deleting that position. That would be, I would support that. Thank you.
Supervisor Conover?
Yeah, I mean, I think that kind of concern is being registered by Supervisor Bramer is perhaps a good reason why, limited to the question that's in front of us, of why the first step should be to unfund the position, but keep it as part of the organizational structure. And so that the point Supervisor Diamond brought up, that then the question is not, we have to go all the way back and say, you know, do we want to create a position and fund a position? The question that would come before us, should we retreat to this full-time position, would be, do we want to fund it and how do we want to fund it? But that would be a question that would come to us regardless. And should we not elect not to fund it, then the position would not be created, so that we would continue to hold the financial strings on the organizational structure of the operational structure of the department. So, and it may be that a year down the road, at budget time, that this position would be deleted from the budget, just summarily deleted from the budget, because it's just there, it's extraneous, it's no longer needed, and it just gets washed out of the organizational structure of the department. So, but I think once and it says it here, defund this position, then to fill that position is going to require the determination by the Board of Supervisors. And I think that's how it should be. It's appropriate.
Supervisor Wild.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think what is important for us to understand is that the event coordinator position last year, based on my recall, was going to be self-funded. So there was like a return on investment discussion about that. And Director Connolly mentioned that that would be something that would come up in the next month's discussion with the tourism department. In addition to that, there's a motion or a resolution in front of this committee. I'm not sure how soon it's going to come up, but Mrs. Connolly's position is going to be open for filling. And my thought is if we're going to have a new director, maybe what we should do is hold on and make a decision and allow this new individual, he or she or him, to define their own team and better have a chance to be involved with that. So I'm not sure if we can delay this, considering that the retirement is going to be April 4th. But as we advertise and move forward with refilling the director of tourism position, I'd like to see the opportunity to allow that new director to build their own team to make this happen.
Okay, that's a suggestion. I would think that they would have that opportunity as soon as they're hired. So that would be my response to that. Supervisor Siebert.
Thank you. I have a question as it relates to the resolution, the motion that's in front of us for discussion right now. And that, and at the appropriate time, I can ask the questions about the events coordinator position and that job description, which I think probably does need to be looked at given the as we start to recover and exit COVID. But it's my understanding that a while back, we made a considerable effort to remove positions that are zero in the budget that are unfunded. And I'm uncomfortable in doing this again. I think that when we look at unfunded positions, while is the supervisor from Bolton in theory, I'm sure is correct, but in practice, if a department has an unfunded position, but they have excess dollars in their salary line, they can fill that position because they have money within their salary. And we're just talking about changing an entire policy, although in this case it wouldn't apply because it's non-elected, which to the county administrator's point is a very good one earlier today. But you can't, I think if you're going to unfund a position, the proper thing to do would be to delete that position. And if it's needed, have that justification, because it may have to be changed down the road and that job description anyway. So chances are you probably aren't filling it in the exact way that you had left it before. But the idea, I mean, years ago, we had so many positions that were unfunded in the budget, and we've done a really good job at looking at those and removing them. And this, my same concern focused around the social media position that I think is before you, but I'm not in favor of doing that, and certainly can debate it or just vote no at the full board. But the other aspect to this, and I've said it before and I'll say it again, so no one thinks I'm picking on them. I think it's a bad look when we continue to have people retire and we bring them back. If it's for a designated time for training, or while that person is still here, we bring someone on to be trained, that's responsible, that's helpful. But we continue to see examples of where this doesn't work out despite our best intentions. And I don't necessarily think it's the right move for the taxpayer, for the county, or for our departments. And I am so grateful for the expertise in that department and for their service. But I just want to be mindful that this is a debate and a policy and an ethical decision that we've had over years now. So thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Conover.
Yeah, my short response would be that if motion is made to not unfund the position and keep it, but to delete the position, I could support that. Because I think in the end, if we're going to reappropriate dollars to create something, it's all one and the same. We can do that at the time we want to do it. So if the committee's so inclined to want to say, no, let's not unfund it and maintain it, let's delete it, I'm good with that.
Yes, Supervisor Driscoll.
Thank you, Chairman. I would respectfully disagree with some of my colleague from Queensbury's statement. Bringing back retirees has often worked in health services, bringing back nurses in order to, to get the work done. We're responsible to taxpayers for tax dollars. Equally important, at least in my opinion, equally important is the delivery of programs and services, the opportunity for taxpayers to get the bang out of the buck. And that's something that a number of our departments accomplish on a daily basis. It's not always about lowering taxes or cutting taxes. It's about making sure that we're delivering services and opportunities to residents of Warren County.
Thank you. I guess I would ask Joanne if how she feels about the deleting the position. Do you have any opinion?
I would be okay with taking it out of the budget schedule. And if we wanted to fill it, whether it was defunded or deleted, we'll still be back at the committee.
Right.
Lisa will retire on March 31st. So I do think that we need a decision today so that there's not a lapse of coverage.
Okay, so is there any amendment to the resolution?
Is there a motion on the floor?
Yes,
Motion on the floor.
you made it. Yep.
I did. Oh, thank you. Yeah, I would amend the motion to delete the position, because I mean, in the end, we're going to have to deliberate on it anyway, should it be brought forward. So I don't see where, we need to argue about it. So I would amend my motion to delete the position, and if it or something else is needed on down the road, we'll deal with it then. I'm good with that. I'll amend my motion.
Okay, we're going to need a second because Supervisor Frazier had to leave. If someone.
Mr. Chairman, it's me. I'll do that.
Yeah.
What? I don't know.
I'll make the motion as made by the supervisor from Bolton to create the position listed and then delete the full-time position. I
Okay.
believe that's what is on.
Right.
tap.
A second by Supervisor Bramer. Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. I believe it's carried. Let's see what's next. We'll do the pending items. Number one is additional work for a formalized policy for the Employee of the Month program. That's still in the works, and Warren County Workplace Violence Policy number 2 to be reviewed for additional updates. I think that's with our county attorney, I believe. So there's no other items. Part 5 is the positions authorized for filling by the standing committee since last meeting. And I guess next we go back to number 3.
So request for, the county attorney articulate the purpose of the executive session.
Yes.
Could I have a point of order? I'm sorry, I'm politely raising my hand, but
Okay. What do you want to know?
thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to know if there's a discussion on your item about the formalized policy under pending items, personnel, subsection 1. You read it. There was no discussion. I had a question. Unless you feel you don't want discussion.
I don't believe that's been discussed. I don't know what there's to discuss.
Well, my point of order is that you read it, asked, that you just moved right on. I have a question regarding it.
All right. Discussion on number 1 in the pending item. What would you like to discuss?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question is as it relates to last year's discussion on the formalized policy that was carried over. This is November, we're in March. And now that we have our county attorney confirmed and on board, I would like to ask if there has been research and dialogue about the subsequent time off and or cash award that would follow the Employee of the Month formalized program, and when we can expect an update on that policy or proposed policy.
I can tell the supervisor from Queensberry that there is a draft legal opinion that has been prepared. I have not had an opportunity to review it and, if necessary, modify it. So that still has to happen, but I will do my best to put that higher on the list of priorities going into the next month. The truth is, there's a tremendous amount that we are trying to catch up to and move forward with. So this is certainly one of those items that we just have not had the opportunity to dedicate time to finalize. But there's been discussion, there's been research, there's been a draft put together by one of my assistants. I have not had the time to dedicate to reviewing, confirming, and finalizing.
May I thank the county attorney?
Yes, you can, May.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the efforts that you've put into that, the feedback that you've given the board and to the public. And I hope that when you're making that consideration, that there is a reflection on straight time off versus the on the cash or spot award. And should you like any examples of those two alternatives that were discussed back in November, I'm happy to provide all the information that I have on that as well. I haven't been asked, but would be more than happy to.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the opportunity for discussion on 1.
Okay. Any other discussion on 1 or 2? Okay. We'll go back to the front to number 3, and these are pending lawsuits.
Yep, and before
Litigation.
I put on the record the request for executive session, I did want to make mention to the committee. I'm not sure why I'm number 3 on the agenda, but if the committee would like to put me at the end, it may make better sense for other employees of the county, given that sometimes the executive session can go on for quite a while.
Yeah, I'm thinking in the future that it probably should be that, we could have department heads sitting in the hall, waiting for us to come out of executive.
Yeah, and it could be 5 minutes. It could be much, much longer than that. So
Right.
if the committee's fine with that, I think that's a great idea, putting my agenda on at the end. So for today, for current litigation, as you can see from the agenda, subject to Public Officers Law 501(1)D, these are all pending matters, current litigation. And there's actually going to be 2 add-ons to that list of 6. It's Copprud v. Warren County, one lawsuit that's part of the Child Victims Act, which is the Michael Easterbrooks matter. Forest Enterprise Management versus the county. Quester French versus Derek Williams. Nicholas Leclerc versus Sarah Raymond. Jason Lewis versus Prime Care Medical, Inc. The 2 additional matters are going to be the estate of Taylor versus Warren County and others. And the last one is Saratoga North Creek Railroad. Under 3B, there are 4 listed legal opinions. Technically, the committee does not have to vote to go into executive session to discuss these matters. Under section 108, subsection 3 of the Public Officers Law, they're actually exempt from open meetings, but I'm including it as a matter of course each month with the request to discuss litigation. And the reason is that each of these opinions were attorney-client documents provided to the Board of Supervisors and relevant county employees. And to that list of 4, which is opinions 4 through 7, is the one that was issued yesterday, 2022-8, which was quorum and majority vote, if there's any questions that the committee has on those. So that would be the basis for requesting a motion for executive session at this time.
Do we have a motion to go into executive session? Moved by Supervisor Conover. Do we have a second?
Chairman,
Yes.
I have a question. Well, a suggestion actually for you, Chairman. If there isn't anything that is super timely with respect to the county attorney's update, I would request that we have these updates at one of our 2 board meetings, because what often happens is that the entire board has to make a decision about these litigation matters. And so we end up going through this whole debate 2 times, where we do it here and then we do it at a full board meeting. And as was just mentioned, these sessions can get very lengthy. So I'm trying to make it a little bit more efficient for us by just having this dialogue about the litigation one time at one of our full board meetings coming up. Unless for some reason there's something that we need to make a decision on today prior to the next board meeting.
And my agenda does not include any requests for resolutions today.
I think we should continue as a committee member. I think we should continue with our report. And as far as if something's actionable, well, I suppose that's something we can deliberate on and think about going forward.
Okay. We still need a second to.
Yeah.
I'll second it. Then we go into executive session. I'll call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
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 I'm opposed, Chairman,
Okay.
for reasons stated. Thank you.
I'm just trying to confirm that there was 4 votes in favor of the motion. Oh, there's,
Yeah. Ms. Runyon was an affirmative also.